All right, guys, welcome back to the MVM Show. I'm Titus, your host, and here with Jim Muller again. Again, not much of a guest anymore, partially a co-host, but he does all the good information, and I just sit here and feed the questions. So good to have you back again, Jim.
Thanks, Titus. Awesome to be here.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm not going to beat a dead horse. We do have a discount code you can put in if you're interested in the chokes, just MVM24, all caps, all one word, MVM 2024, and you guys can check that out. I know you'll hear it in other ones too. I'll try not to burn your brains out with that over and over again, but what we want to talk about today and is different waterfowl species require different adjustments of guns, choke, ammo, and I'm excited to hear about this one, Jim. Thanks for joining us again and answering these questions.
No, you're welcome. Yeah, so basically, I always talk about different species require different skills and different ballistics, right? And what I mean by skills, let's not talk yet about ballistics, but just shooting skills, right? It's just like if you're shooting trap or skeet or sporting clays. Every time that you approach a target, it's done differently based on distance, angle, speed, right? So there's only three things that create or play into how much lead a target needs to hit. Number one is the speed of the projectile, which we don't really think about because we're always shooting approximately the same velocity, right? In a shotgun load. But then you've got distance and speed of the target. So the reason that we need to think about this differently based on the species we're hunting is because, if we're hunting a turkey and it's standing still, that's one thing. If we're, shooting a pheasant that was flushed from underfoot going almost straight away, it's the same thing as shooting a turkey that's not moving. Even though it's moving, it's not moving because it's going straight away. Same thing as if the bird's coming straight at you. But when we get into different presentations of birds crossing or coming from behind us going overhead, driven targets coming at us overhead, all these different scenarios of angles, then we have the difference of speed thrown into all of that. And then throwing into all of that with live birds is the unpredictability, right? We don't know what the heck they're going to do when we're ready to pull a trigger. We have them dead to rights, and then all of a sudden they do some twisting or diving or who the heck knows what. You know how many times I've been on an old squaw and I'm ready to, he's coming to the decoys and I'm just getting ready to sort of acquire him to shoot him. And he sees a bird landed and he puts the brakes on and just falls out of the sky and hits the water before I could even pull a trigger,
Yeah.
So we never know what a live bird is going to do. So it's unpredictable. Different species fly at different speeds. Different species, some species die easier than others. Like
Pintail dies easy.
Yeah, like a brant. I mean, a brant, if you jump up and yell loud enough, they'll just die. So,
really?
So it doesn't take a lot of ammo, a lot of pellets or a lot of energy to kill a brant. It's just one of those types of birds that die pretty easy. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, you've got big Canada geese late in the winter, lots of down, lots of fat. They're a big bird. You've also got eider, sea ducks. Eider also heavy, thick down, lots of fat, big-bodied bird, lungs like a giant, right? Old squaw, smaller bird, extremely fast. Canvasbacks, the speed king, right? So even mallards, if they have a tailwind on them and they're hauling butt, they're cooking, right? So every single species, every single scenario, every single shot that we fire requires a different type of shooting ability or the way we address the target or the ammo we're shooting or the choke we're shooting,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe even the gun we're shooting. So all of these things come into play. And over the years and all of the people I speak with, this comes up in almost every conversation, right? Because it's not really something that people talk about. We get so hung up on what gun should I shoot? What decoy should I use? What ammo should I use? What choke should I buy? What boat should I use? You know, should I pull it with a Ford Chevy or a Dodge? You know, I mean, whatever. But we don't talk about the actual shooting part, which is the most important part of all of it. Because if we can't put the pattern on the bird, we're not going to go home with any birds.
Right.
Yeah. So what I want to teach people and talk to people about is not only the ballistics side of things, but also the shooting side of things. And what I mean by that is marksmanship, or the way you address a bird. So if I'm hunting puddle ducks, let's say, and the puddle ducks are going to be inside 40 yards, they're
Mm-hmm.
coming to decoys.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be very little lead, and you could get away with using much smaller shot ammo. You could get away with things like steel or bismuth with no problem at all.
Mm-hmm.
And the bird is going to be dispatched very, very ethically. They don't require a lot of lead normally. And, we talk about velocity a lot of times. When we get into velocity, one of the main questions I get from people is, well, if I change velocity, my lead will be totally different. Well, that's true and false depending on distance.
Mm-hmm.
So, based on Newton's third law, the faster it starts out, the faster it slows down. And also, obviously, the heavier it is, the farther it remains. It retains its velocity and energy further downrange.
Mm-hmm.
So, one thing that comes up a lot, especially with steel shot, which over 80% of people use,
Mm-hmm.
is the velocity. So, what I explain to people is when it comes to velocity, when you're shooting inside 25 yards, velocity matters with your lead and with your sight picture,
Mm-hmm.
because velocity matters at that distance. So if you're starting out really fast, meaning faster than, let's say, 1450, your lead is going to be noticeably smaller inside 25 yards than if you were starting out at, let's say, 1145. 1145 is tongue in cheek because nobody makes a steel load that slow, but they do make, lead target loads that slow. So the reason I bring that up is if you're used to shooting skeet or sporting clays with 1145 feet per second, and then you go out there to shoot your ducks at the same distance, and, meaning inside 25 yards, and you're shooting 1550, you're going to be shooting in front of everything. Okay.
Mm.
So when we talk about practicing, we need to try to remember we want to try to use a similar velocity that we're hunting with. So ultimately, if I personally know I'm not going to pull a trigger past 25 yards on a duck or goose, and I'm going to practice in the off season, maybe on a skeet field or sporting clay field, and I'm going to be practicing on targets inside that 25 yard mark, I certainly don't want to be shooting 1145 feet per second and then go by 1550 or 1700 feet per second steel and expect to hit anything, because you're
Mm-hmm.
not gonna.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it's really important that we take this into consideration. We want to match the velocity based on the distance we're shooting and what we're shooting. So we could get really deep into this and it could get confusing, but I don't want to confuse people, but I want to put this out there so we have an idea of what can happen. So let's say we're practicing with lead shot at 1200 feet per second, shooting sporting clays, and we're shooting at targets out to 40 yards. We then go and get into the duck blind and we're going to start shooting steel shot at, let's say, I don't know, 1550. Well, what's going to happen is there's going to be a threshold.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way you can learn this is by doing it. I could talk till I'm blue in the face about this, and it's going to sound a little confusing, but if you go out there and do it, you're going to experience it. So lead is heavier than steel.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're shooting a lead 7.5 versus, let's say, a steel 6, it's going to be pretty comparable in ballistics out to a certain distance because of weight of pellet, right? But you've got wind resistance on a bigger pellet. It's going to be affected more than a smaller pellet. You've got, let's say, the weight of the two pellets are pretty consistent because one's bigger than the other. One's steel, one's lead, but the weight is comparable. So ballistically, it's going to be somewhat equivalent. The problem is because steel shot only weighs like 7.82 grams per cubic centimeter, and lead weighs closer to 12, what's going to happen is that lead pellet is going to retain velocity further downrange than the steel is. So even though the steel started out faster than the lead, because the steel is lighter than the lead, it's going to lose velocity downrange faster, which means if you start to shoot further, you're going to actually need more lead with the steel than you would have for the same lead, right?
Yeah.
So it gets confusing thinking about all that, right? I even made a little mistake in my wording there. So the shot sizes are different sizes. The lead's a 7.5, the steel's a 6. They have about the same weight, right? But the problem is the steel is lighter per gram per cubic centimeter,
right?
For gravity, right? So it's not going to retain the same downrange. So it's pretty confusing. But the thing is also is because of Newton's third law of physics, if it starts out faster, it slows down faster. So now you've got another accumulative problem. Because the steel started out so fast versus the slower velocity target load, it's immediately going to slow down faster. So you've got all these things in play. So the reason I'm bringing this up, even though it may sound confusing and a little too deep, I'm bringing it up because it's going to affect how you shoot. Yeah. So if you practice with lead target loads in the off season, and then you go out to the duck blind and you shoot something totally different, your results are going to be totally different.
I know.
So I want you to
what do you do? And I have thought about that. It's funny you bring that up, and I'm glad you did because I have thought about that a lot. I'm like, man, is this really helping me? Because what I'm doing with this load for this practicing is not what I'm shooting in the field. So how is this really going to help me? And I'm not going to go out there and shoot 100 shells of heavy bismuth. You know what I mean? Yep. So how can you do that? Is there a way?
There is. So basically what I've learned over the years through many rounds is that if I shoot a lead target load around 1250, I'm pretty darn safe with everything else that I shoot in the duck blind. And the reason is what I just explained, because lead, right, it retains its velocity fairly good, better than bismuth, better than steel, not as good as TSS. But the thing is, when most duck hunters go out and hunt ducks, they're using steel or bismuth these days. So when they're hunting, most duck hunters don't shoot past 40 yards. And a high percentage of that is most of them don't shoot past 30, right? So between that 30-yard and 40-yard, 45-yard range, a target load, lead target load at 1250 is going to be so similar in lead or sight picture to a 1450 steel or a 1350 bismuth that you're never going to see the difference. So that's a really good happy medium to go with.
So lead 1250 target
Yep.
load.
Lead to
Huh.
1250 target load is a really good velocity to use, because if you go to steel hunting loads or bismuth hunting loads, the difference is going to be
The
so
ratios.
minute you won't
Yeah.
see it.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Good.
It's sort of like a happy medium. Nothing's going to be exact. So now go on opposite ends of the spectrum. If we're going to shoot inside 25 yards, that's where you're going to see your most deviation. Okay. If you're shooting lead target loads that are slow versus a steel load that's extremely fast, you will see a difference in lead inside 25 yards. But I got to be honest with you, not to sound pompous, but if you're shooting a duck inside 25 yards, it should be pretty easy to figure out. Okay.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not that hard. So basically, put it on the beak and pull a trigger almost,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe just give it a little bit in front of the beak, and you're probably going to kill the bird. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of what velocity ammo you're using,
Yeah.
because remember, the duck is about 2 feet long. Your pattern, if you're using the right choke and load, it should be at least 2 feet in diameter, and ultimately, it's going to be 30 or even a little bigger. So, with that said, you've got quite a bit of margin right there. So you're not going to, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
25
Yeah.
yards is pretty darn close. So you
If you
should be
just
able to figure
imagine
it out.
shooting that, like you'd say a lot, if you just imagine shooting that blanket at the bird,
Yes.
you know.
Yep. If you're practicing off season, you know, and you're using a lead target load 1250, right? You could even use 1300 if you want. But if you're using that 1250 feet per second lead target load and you're shooting a duck with steel shot inside 25, well, just understand that you don't need much lead at all. So if you're giving them 4 feet, chances are you're shooting in front of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just some common sense. Now, going the opposite end of the spectrum with far distance, if I'm shooting past 50 yards on a duck, I'm using TSS, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I want to make sure that I'm going to kill them. If I'm shooting past 50 yards with TSS, if my TSS velocity is only 1200, and normally at other ducks I'm shooting steel at 1300,
Mm-hmm.
if I was to shoot steel at that 50 plus yard duck flying, let's say I need 15 feet of lead. With the TSS, I only need like 6 or maybe 8. Okay. That's
Mm-hmm.
how dramatic and how drastic the velocity changes
Hmm.
because of distance and because of
Right.
weight retention.
Mm-hmm.
So these are all things that we can only learn this by doing it.
Yeah.
Like I could sit here and tell you exact examples within a foot, but it's not going to mean anything to you because we all shoot different with different methods of shooting, and we're all going to see different things. And we could get into the whole shooting thing and how to shoot and all that stuff. But the fact is, understand that there's great differences when you go beyond 40 yards, and there's great differences inside 25 yards.
Yeah.
The in between that, you're not going to see much of a difference regardless of what you use in regards to forward allowance, you know?
Yeah.
So just remember that. If you're shooting TSS past 50, and you've just switched from steel or bismuth, you're going to see significant differences in lead. With TSS, it's going to be a lot less.
Okay.
If you're shooting hypervelocity steel and you're shooting inside 25 yards, there's almost no lead at all, provided you're moving the gun with the speed of the target or slightly faster.
Mm-hmm.
However, if you're shooting standard velocity TSS at that same distance, the lead is going to be, a little more, but it's all relative, right?
Yeah. Right.
Now, the other thing that you want to think about, we might as well talk about shooting methods, right? Seeing that we're talking about lead and sight pictures and all that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I get so many people asking me, well, Jim, I'm always shooting behind the duck, or I could never hit the duck if it's past 25 yards. Or, Jim, I can't hit anything if it's past 40 yards, right? Well, number one reason is because we don't practice on targets that are those distances. The reason that I shoot ducks past 50 is because I practice on clay targets past 50. So I know exactly what my lead needs to be. And I know my ballistics. I know that if I'm on the duck, it's going to die. I'm not going to cripple it, which is the only reason why I shoot at those distances, because I've already perfected all of my equipment. I'm a ballistics expert, masterclass shooter, and I know how to put the pattern on the bird at that distance. And I also know that the ammo I'm choosing to use is going to kill the bird at that distance. So the only way that you could become a successful, good shooter in wing shooting is to get out there and practice on a sporting clay course. Because, back in the 50s and stuff, like when my dad did a lot of hunting, there were a lot of ducks and there was a lot of opportunity in one day of hunting to where you would actually figure things out. Back then there was a lot of diver hunting, sea ducks, divers, and a lot of birds over the water. And you would see where you were hitting and missing. You would see that you were 6 feet behind a bird. And you would be like, oh, my Lord, and you would start to figure it out. You would start to give it more lead until you started killing birds. And, you started doing that at 25 yards, and then it went to 35, and then it went to 45. And before you knew it, you were killing birds at 50. And most of the reason that we don't kill birds at extended distance, and I consider extended distance 40 and beyond, is not because of the ballistics of the ammo, but because we're shooting behind the bird. And a lot of us will hit the bird in the tail end, and, we see feathers and we see clouds of feathers or a few feathers, and the bird keeps going. And we're like, oh man, it's because I'm using steel shot, or I'm using this ammo, or I'm using this choke. Well, a lot of it was because you're on the back of the bird, not the front. Okay. So the only way that you could correct that is by practicing. And the way we practice off season or during season is on a sporting clay course, not on a trap field and not on a skeet field. And the reason that I say that is if all you're doing is hunting pheasant from a flush dog and the birds are going away from you, well, by all means, practice on a trap field because that simulates that. If you're only shooting birds inside 25 yards and most of them are, quartering or crossing, well, by all means, practice on a skeet field because that's what that is. The problem is those are very limited, right? You're not just going to shoot birds that are crossing inside 25 yards, and you're not only going to shoot birds going straight away from you inside 25 yards, right? So the reason that I'm such a big promoter and a component of sporting clays is because sporting clays was developed to imitate and simulate hunting. And it's like golf with a shotgun. So every station you go to, every target you shoot is different. Different angles, different distances, different sizes, sometimes even different color. So what it does is it teaches you how to hit a moving target. It doesn't teach you how to hit just this target. And the reason that that's so important is like we started this conversation, when we are shooting a live bird, they're very unpredictable. And then throw into that not only speed, size, species, and distance, but we've also got all the different atmospheric conditions. We've got wind, we've got clouds, we've got bright sun, we've got all these different things in play. And we need to think about these things when we're hunting, but more so, we need to think about it when we're practicing. And if you're a serious duck hunter, if you're a professional duck hunter, or if you're just a ham and egg weekender, you like to go out on the weekends and hunt, these birds, respect you going out and practicing so you're not crippling stuff all the time. Or you, as an individual hunter, you deserve it and you owe it to yourself to be able to be the best you can be at what you're doing. And the only way you can do that is on a sporting clay course. Okay.
Yep.
And what happens is the moment that you go out and you start to figure out how to hit sporting clays, you may need to hire an instructor, a mentor, a coach. But if you can figure out how to hit 50% out of 100, now you're on your way to becoming a better duck hunter or a better wing shooter. If you get into 60 out of 100, 70 out of 100, 80 out of 100, now what's happening is now you're going from, if you're 50 out of 100, you're maybe 25 or 30% on a live bird. Okay. If you're at 75% out of 100 on clay targets, you're probably 50% on live birds, maybe. Okay. Depending on the scenario. Depends on whether we're shooting mallards coming into decoys or if we're shooting sea ducks at 40 yards ripping by with a tailwind. But when you start to get up into the 80 out of 100, 90 out of 100 on a sporting clay course, you will go from being a mediocre wing shooter to being extremely surprised if the duck doesn't die when you pull a trigger. Okay. That's how significant it is. And when you start to practice and all of this starts to come together, the way that you shoot a sporting clay target is directly related to how you shoot a moving bird. It's identical. The only thing different is a live bird is unpredictable. But the way that you see the target, the way that you address the target, the way that you move the gun with the target, and the way that you kill the target is identical. So that's why it's so important for me to promote sporting clays as a masterclass competitor and as a master wing shooter and as a hunter. Because if you're not going to practice on a sporting clay course in the off season, and then you're just going to pick up your gun in October and plan on going out and killing some ducks, you're greatly mistaken because it's not going to happen. Okay. You're going to get lucky or you're just going to start crippling birds or whatever. Or maybe you do really well because you're just a natural shooter. But I'm here to assure you that if you do put some time in on that sporting clay course, it's going to help you tremendously, not only with the wing shooting, but with your confidence. And if you have more confidence, your game is going to be more enjoyable and your game is going to be better. And it's just simple. I mean, it's with any sport, right?
How do you, this is so good, Jim. I appreciate it. How do you feel about and how highly do you suggest doing sporting clay during the season?
So for me, over the years, I've learned myself individually, if I go to a shoot, now keep in mind, I've shot a lot, right? I've shot a lot of clay targets. At my level of experience of shooting, if I go to a sporting clay course once a month and I shoot a couple hundred targets, I feel pretty good when I'm in the duck blind. What I mean by pretty good is I'm okay. I get by, I make my shots nice, but I don't have that real warm, fuzzy feeling. I know I can kill a bird when I'm pulling the trigger,
right? But
I may not kill a bird when I pull a trigger. Okay. If I go and practice and I shoot, 100 or 200 targets every couple weeks, I feel really good when I get in the duck blind because I feel fluid. I'm comfortable with my equipment. I know how the gun feels. The gun feels right when I pick it up and move it. If I'm shooting once a week and I'm shooting even only 100 targets a week, I feel like I cannot miss. Like if a duck comes anywhere near the distance that I'm comfortable shooting at, whatever that distance is for you, I feel like that duck is going to die when I pick the gun up, undoubtedly, to the point where if it doesn't, I sort of get a little shocked, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So these are the differences and the different levels of shooting. So if you can afford the time, the money, the schedule to go shoot 100 rounds of sporting clays a week when you're in the off season, that's amazing. And the level of confidence, the level of skill will be unmatched when you're in that
Mm,
duck blind. So I highly encourage it if you can do
mm.
it. If you can
And
only go once a month, well, hey, it's a lot better than not going at all, you know?
mhm. Now, like say in the off season, I mean, yeah, I guess it doesn't matter. But if you go once a month or twice a month or three, whatever, you can go in the off season. That's got to just put you at such a higher level come duck season.
It does. It's I can't even explain it. Like it's night and day. So
Mm.
like give an example. There were years that I didn't duck hunt, which was foreign to me. But there were years I didn't duck hunt. So like I was fishing a lot or I was working a lot, I was making choke tubes.
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
doing something else, right?
life.
And
Mm.
then, my buddy or somebody would be like, "Hey man, let's go duck hunting next week." And I'd be like, "Oh, cool, awesome." And I would come down, I would get my gear ready. I would pick up my gun and I would like mount it. It freaking felt like a broom.
Hmm.
I was like, "Oh God." It didn't feel right
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I haven't been touching it, right?
Yep, yep.
I mean, right now, if I pick up any one of my, I don't know how many guns I own, but if I pick up any one of those shotguns, I mean, I could shoot lights out on anything. I don't care
Hmm.
if it's my side by side 410, my BPS 10 gauge, my 870, my A400 Extreme Plus, my Mossberg 940. It doesn't matter what gun I pick up right now. I'll go smoke a duck or a clay target. Anything you throw at me, it's gonna die.
Hmm.
You know, and that's because I've been shooting, I've been practicing, I've been hunting. You know,
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
it's really, really, really important that we do this. And even if I am shooting sporting clays in the off season, whether I'm shooting 5 times a week, whether I'm shooting once a week, whether I'm shooting once a month, when August rolls around, September rolls around, you bet your butt I'm out there at the sporting clay course grinding a couple hundred targets as much as I can
Mm.
because I know duck season's coming. And
Yeah,
the first day that I get in the duck blind and the first duck comes and I pick up the gun, I want it to be dead
yeah.
without even feeling any awkwardness or any lack of confidence or anything other than, come on, I got something waiting for you.
Hmm.
That's it. It's over. You know?
Yeah, because why? I mean, this is my thinking. Why do something unless you're going to try to be at the top of your game doing it?
Yep, exactly. And,
And
like,
I'm going to admit to you, I've never really, and I don't remember if that was something we talked about off air or if we talked about in this episode, but talking about how you were saying the trap or the skeet. I can't remember if we said that on here before we started recording, but it's like, yeah, it totally makes sense. If everything's on 25 yards and it's moving left to right, yeah, go ahead. By all means, skeet. If it's
yep,
going away from you like pheasant, trap. But it's like, it's not. That's not reality for duck hunting. There's so many different scenarios flushing, low, fast, behind you, like in front of you.
yep,
And, man, honestly, you really got me excited for this off season training and shooting because I'm going to be honest. I've went out and shot skeet and trap. And I have done sporting clay course too, but not with the mindset of that's the most important thing I need to be doing. I've just kind of bounced around and I always question my head, is this really carrying over to duck hunting when I'm only doing trap or skeet? But now that you're saying what you're saying, it's like, okay, I know now what I'm going to be doing for
yep.
sure.
So I'm glad you brought that up, Titus, because that brings something else to mind. So the way we practice is just as important as practicing.
Mm,
So if you're a shooting instructor, or a coach or a mentor, you'd know immediately what I'm talking about. So like, if I go out to practice and I don't practice the right way, it's like not practicing at all.
right, right.
So as a let's just compare this for a moment. So I'm a sporting clay competitor. If I want to practice to get to a better score, if I want to become a better sporting clay competitor, and I want my score to be better or more consistent at a higher level, I need to practice a very specific way. Okay. If I go out and being a high level shooter, it doesn't matter. If I go out and I go to the sporting clay course every single day and I shoot 500 targets every day, which is a lot of targets, and I don't practice the proper way, it does not help me one bit. I will stay exactly where I'm at. But if I practice the right way, I could go out and shoot just 100 targets each session and become a much better shooter because of the way I practice. So there's a lot that goes into shooting, okay, and learning and excelling and becoming a better shooter. And what I like to do, let's get back to different species, right? So if I know that I've got some eider hunting coming up and I'm going to go hunt eider, let's say Maine, Massachusetts, whatever, and I'm going to specifically be targeting eider, or maybe I'm going to go to Greenland and I'm going to go hunt for king eider. I certainly don't want to miss, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, what distance do I think I'm comfortable shooting at an eider based on my choke, my ammo, my skill? Okay, I know that I'm capable of shooting 60 yards, let's say. Okay, and if I shoot an eider at 60 yards, I know it's going to die if I'm on it because of my ammo choice, my choke choice. Okay, but now I need to figure out how to hit an eider at 60 yards. Okay, how am I going to do that? I'm going to go out on a sporting clay course. I'm going to find a station. It only needs to be one station, one target, or it could be multiples, which is even better. But let's say I go to a sporting clay course that's local to me. Local means within 3 hours drive. So I don't want to hear any excuses. You can't find a sporting clay course because you can. They're all over the place. So I will drive up to 3 hours to go to the right target. I will get there, I will find the right target, and I will take a flat of shells, which is 250 rounds, and I will sit there and I will shoot that target using every shooting method, and I will move back if I can and shoot it even further. And what I'll do is I'll go up to the target at the stand and I will shoot 10 in a row until I hit 10 in a row. And what I mean by that is I will use one shooting method that I know works for me, whether it's a sustained lead, a pull away lead, a swing through lead, diminishing lead, whatever lead I feel is best for me on that target, I'm going to start with that method. So let's say I'm going to start with a sustained lead, right? I'm going to start with a sustained lead in the shooting stand at that target at, let's say, 50 or 60 yards. And I'm going to shoot 10 targets. If I miss one, I start all over. I shoot that target till I hit 10 in a row. And then I change my distance. Okay? Or I change my shooting method. So maybe, okay, I broke 10 in a row using sustained lead, meaning I pulled it along on a string, right? Sustained lead. Came up in front of the target at the right lead, pulled it along and shot. Okay, that's sustained lead. Broke 10 in a row, got it, felt good. Now I'm going to try a pull away lead and I'm going to break 10 in a row again. So pull away means you come up near the target or on the target and you start to pull away from it to generate the lead, right? Pull away lead. Come up on it, pull away from it, pull a trigger when it looks and feels right. I'm going to break 10 in a row using that method. Then I'm going to use swing through method. I'm going to come from behind the target. I'm going to pass it. I'm going to pull a trigger when it feels right or looks right. I'm going to break 10 in a row using that method. Then I'm going to use diminishing lead. Break points here, targets here coming toward me. I'm going to use diminishing lead. I'm going to let it close in on me. And then when it looks about right, I'm going to just bang, shoot. Okay? Diminishing lead. I'm going to break 10 in a row like that. When I'm finished doing all of that, I am going to know immediately which method was the most comfortable to break those 10 targets in a row. It's
Yeah.
like it's like a switch. It's like, oh
Wow.
man, pull away was the best for that target.
Hmm.
Definitely. Yes, I broke 10 in a row using every method. Some of them felt difficult. Some of them felt okay. One of them stood out amongst all the rest as, oh, yeah, that's the way.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
Then, once I've done that, then I'm going to take a few steps back because I'm going to make sure that I'm practicing somewhere where I'm able to do that, where, it's legal at the club and they allow me to do that. It may be out on a feed task field where it's an open field where I can move back, or
Yeah.
I can move up to the target if I can't hit it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a target that I need to practice. I'm going to hit it 10 times in a row. If I can't, I'm going to move up closer to it until I figure it out. Then I'm going to move back and I'm going to do it again. I'm going to move back further and I'm going to do it again. All of that goes into my planning of a duck hunt. So now when I go out there, I get so many people like slamming me for my shot cam videos. You're unethical shooting a duck at 50 or 60 yards. You're sky busting. You're this, you're that. And I'm like, well, let me ask you a question. And this is an ego speaking. Let me ask you a question. If I smoke a duck at 20 yards with one shot, and I smoke a duck at 60 yards with one shot, you tell me what is the difference. There's no difference. It's the same darn thing. So how can you say to me that because I shot a duck at 60 or 70 or 80 or 90 yards, I picked out one duck, I smoked it with one shot, it's stone dead. How can you say to me it's sky blasting or it's unethical? You can't. It's not.
No.
So all that is wrongful thinking, wrong mindset, wrong mindedness, however you want to look at it, ego, whatever it is, it's false. It's not the right way of thinking. What you should be doing is saying, wow, why can he do that?
Yeah.
How does he do that? Why does he do it? What is he using to be able to do it? You may not want to do it, but the fact is it can be done. And it can be done every time, very consistently, very comfortably. So you got to ask yourself, do I want to do it? Yeah, I want to do it, but I have no idea how. Well, you know what? Get out there and start practicing on sporting clays the way I just described. Because if I could break a clay target at 100 yards with a lead 7.5, you can certainly kill a duck at 60 with a TSS.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
It's not a question. It's just a question of whether you're willing to put in the work to do it.
Wow. That's good. This is a good episode.
Yeah. So
I think that might be a good spot to end.
Practice,
man. Practice. I mean, Michael Jordan did what he did. I mean, he was at the top of his game and he was still getting up at 3:00 in the gym and practicing.
Yep.
And that's why he is who he is. And that's why we all know his name, even if you don't play basketball. So, and that's challenged me. Thank you for challenging me. And I'm sure a lot of the listeners, because I do want to get better. I am a competitive, and when I say competitive, I'm not necessarily worried about being competitive towards others. I'm competitive with myself. Just like powerlifting, I've done powerlifting. It's like I'm trying to beat my own numbers, and anyone around me, I'm rooting them on to beat their numbers. Right? It's
Absolutely.
not about me lifting more. So in this industry, it's like I want everybody to be at a better shot. I don't want everybody out the refuge. If we're all packed in there like sardines, shooting and nothing falling, we're educating birds. I want to teach people like you're doing right now to Tim, this is how you do it. If you want to do it right and you care, this is how you do it. And I think this was such a great episode for that. If we really care about this sport, we need to be, I don't want to hear anybody saying this is unethical, that's unethical. If we're not even putting in the work ourselves to be more of a better wing shooter as a hunter, that's, to me, that is more ethical.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like anything, any sport, any game, any hunting situation. You've got people that like shooting deer at 50 yards with a rifle. You've got people that are very capable and love shooting deer at 600 yards.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
two totally different things, but it's not because, it can't be done. It's just because people have trained for it.
Yes.
That's why they're snipers, right? They're specifically trained for what they do. I can't
Exactly.
do it because I don't practice it.
Right.
So it's just like whether you're hunting ducks or geese or pheasant, it doesn't matter. You just need to practice based on the amount that you want to excel to.
That's good.
If you only want to shoot ducks at 15 yards with their feet in the decoys, that's one thing. You
Mm-hmm.
practice that. If you want to
Mm-hmm.
shoot eider, old squaw, screaming by with a tailwind at 60 yards, well, then you need to practice that.
Mm-hmm.
That's it,
Yeah, that's good. That's so good.
Yeah.
Coming from a professional instructor and masterclass shooter, so that's so good. All right, well, we're going to go ahead and end this one. We're kind of at our timeline there, man. This was I really enjoyed all of these we've recorded already so far, but this one was really, I think maybe because it challenged me, and I like to be challenged.
Yeah,
I don't really want someone just to tickle my ears. I want stuff that's going to make me better and challenge me to be better. So thanks, Jim, again for this episode, and thanks everybody for listening. We will see you guys on the next one.
Awesome. Thanks, Titus.